Story 4, Chapter 1, The Market of Shadows. Hey, everyone! Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're diving into a brand new story that's going to take us straight into the heart of a medieval market, where danger and opportunity collide. Meet Elias, an alchemist with a dream of turning lead into gold. And his journey begins in the shadowy stalls of a bustling trade hub. So, grab a snack, hit that like button if you're excited, and subscribe if you're new here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing you all from around the world. Let's light a torch and step into the market of shadows. Elias wasn't your typical village dweller. While others bartered for bread or mended fences, he roamed the edges of the market of shadows, a sprawling bazaar nestled between crumbling city walls and dense forests. The market was a chaotic blend of sights and smells, wooden stalls groaning under the weight of goods, their roofs patched with tattered cloth, filled with the sharp scent of spices, the earthy tang of leather, and the occasional whiff of something burning. The air buzzed with the low hum of whispered deals, the clatter of rusted coins, and the occasional shout of a merchant haggling. Elias carried a worn leather satchel, its contents a mix of glass vials, a brass scale, and a tattered grimoire. His tools in this risky niche of alchemy. Alchemy was a double-edged sword in the Middle Ages. It promised riches beyond imagination, turning base metals into gold. But it also drew the ire of the church and the envy of thieves. Elias had learned the craft from a wandering scholar, mastering the art of mixing mercury, sulfur, and rare minerals like lapis lazuli. His days in the market were a grind, setting up his small stall, weighing powders on his wobbly brass scale, and trading with cloaked figures who asked for elixirs or transmutation hints. His hands bore the marks of his trade, scars from mishandled chemicals and calluses from grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle he kept tucked away. Privacy was a luxury he couldn't afford. Elias shared his market space with a young helper, Tobin, a scrappy kid with a sharp eye for trouble. They worked shoulder to shoulder under a frayed awning, their sleeping spot. A thin blanket rolled out behind the stall, exposed to the night's chill. The market crowd was a constant audience, merchants eyeing his wares, guards patrolling with rusted swords, and pickpockets weaving through. The city lord, a stern figure named Lord Cedric, sent his men to collect taxes, their metal armor clanking as they passed. The church, too, loomed large, with priests muttering about the sin of meddling with nature's order. Elias's secret was a formula, scribbled on a fragile parchment hidden in his grimoire, hinting at the philosopher's stone, a legendary substance said to grant eternal life and perfect transmutation. He'd pieced it together from overheard whispers and old texts, keeping it locked away from prying eyes. In the market, he traded cautiously, offering minor potions, a salve that eased pain, a tincture that dulled hunger, while guarding his true goal. But trouble brewed when a new buyer appeared, a tall man in a fur-lined cloak, his face shadowed, asking about the stone's secret. His voice was smooth, but his gaze was piercing, and Elias felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The market of shadows was a battlefield of intrigue. Armored guards roamed, their metal clanking a reminder of the law, enforcing a curfew that kept the honest at bay. Rumors swirled of a church inquisitor on the hunt for heretics, and Elias caught wind of a trader flogged for selling cursed goods. The stakes were life and death. He kept his grimoire close, its leather cover worn, but Tobin's curiosity grew. "What's in there?" the boy asked one afternoon, his fingers brushing the satchel. Elias brushed him off, his heart racing as he tucked it deeper. Despite the risks, Elias pushed forward. His latest trade was with a cloaked woman offering a pouch of dragon's blood resin, a rare ingredient from the East said to enhance alchemical reactions. They met in a dim corner, her rusted dagger glinting as she bargained. Elias weighed the resin on his brass scale, its deep red hue promising power. But she demanded a glimpse of his formula. He refused, sensing danger, and she slipped away. As he turned, the fur-lined man watched again, his presence a growing shadow. That evening, a guard's shout pierced the dusk. A raid was imminent. Elias grabbed his satchel and dagger, shoving Tobin under the stall as armored figures closed in. The market erupted, stalls crashing, tattered cloth flying. He darted into an alley, the grimoire clutched tight, knowing he'd need more than trade to survive. The next chapter will follow Elias as he seeks a hidden ally to protect his secret and evade the hunt. Stick around, give this a thumbs up, and let's see where this shadowy journey leads. Story 4, Chapter 2, The Market of Shadows. Welcome back, folks. We're diving deeper into the alchemist Elias's wild ride. Last time, we saw him tinkering in his shadowy workshop, dodging church rules and village mobs, all while chasing the philosopher's stone. Tonight, we're heading to a bustling medieval market where Elias hopes to find a patron, or maybe a trap. So, hit that like button if you're hooked. Subscribe if you're new, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Let's light the torches and step into the chaos. Elias knew his workshop couldn't sustain his dreams forever. The exploded potion had left his supplies dwindling, and Tobin's grumbling was getting louder. So he packed a leather satchel with a few vials of his latest concoctions, some shimmering elixirs and a jar of powdered antimony, and set off for the market of Bright Hollow, a notorious trading hub 2 days' journey away. The road was rough, lined with overgrown hedges and the occasional bandit shadow. But Elias pressed on, his cloak flapping in the wind. Bright Hollow was a sensory overload. Stalls creaked under the weight of goods, spices from the east, furs from the north, and trinkets that glinted with dubious origins. The air smelled of roasted meat, damp wool, and the faint metallic tang of coin. Merchants shouted over each other, haggling in a dozen dialects, while pickpockets wove through the crowd. Elias kept his satchel close, his eyes scanning for someone who might understand his niche. He wasn't looking for just any buyer. He needed someone with money and a tolerance for the forbidden. His first stop was a stall run by a wiry merchant named Gavrik, who dealt in rare herbs and oddities. Gavrik wore a patched leather apron, his hands stained with the juices of crushed roots. He eyed Elias's vials with interest, his face lighting up with a greedy grin. "Alchemical wares. Hey, show me what you've got," he said, his voice a low rasp. Elias demonstrated a minor transmutation, turning a copper coin a shade closer to silver with a dab of his elixir. Gavrik clapped, but his offer was a pittance, barely enough for a week's bread. Elias walked away, his hopes dimming. Next, he approached a hooded figure lingering near a darkened alley, a man rumored to be a representative of a wealthy noble. The figure's cloak was lined with fine fur, a stark contrast to the tattered cloth of the common folk. He introduced himself as Lord Cedric's agent, his tone smooth but edged with suspicion. Elias pitched his work, hinting at the philosopher's stone without revealing too much. The agent's eyes narrowed, and he demanded a private demonstration. They slipped into a shadowed tent, where Elias set up his brass scales and a small crucible. The mixture bubbled, then fizzled out. Another failure. The agent sneered and vanished into the crowd. Frustration gnawed at Elias, but he pressed on. He noticed a woman in a wimple and a faded tunic, her stall piled with clay jars and a rusted iron mortar. Her name was Mara, a widow who'd learned herbology from her late husband. She had a sharp eye and a sharper tongue, but she listened as Elias explained his quest. Unlike the others, she didn't scoff. "I've heard of your kind," she said, her voice steady. "But alchemy's a dangerous game. The church watches, and so do the thieves." She offered a trade, her knowledge of local plants for a share of his profits if he succeeded. Elias agreed, sensing a rare ally. The market wasn't just a place of trade. It was a battlefield of secrets. A group of armored guards patrolled, their metal clanking with every step, enforcing the town's laws against unlicensed magic. Elias had to dodge their gaze, ducking behind stalls of worn wood and tattered awnings. Rumors flew that a church inquisitor was in town, sniffing out heretics. Elias's heart raced as he overheard a merchant whisper about a recent alchemist burned at the stake in a nearby village. The stakes were higher than ever. By dusk, Elias and Mara struck a deal. She'd supply him with rare herbs like mandrake and belladonna, grown in secret patches, in exchange for a cut of any gold he produced. They sealed it with a handshake, her calloused palm pressing against his scarred one. But as they parted, a cloaked figure watched from the shadows, his face obscured. Elias felt a chill. Someone else knew his plans. The next chapter will take us back to the workshop, where a new experiment and a hidden threat await. Keep watching! Give this a thumbs up, and let's see what happens next. Story 4, Chapter 3, The Forbidden Experiment. Hey, friends! We're back for the final chapter of Elias the Alchemist's story. Last time, we followed him to the shady market of Bright Hollow, where he teamed up with Mara and dodged some serious trouble. Tonight, we're heading back to his workshop for a forbidden experiment that could change everything, or end it all. So, hit that like button if you're on edge, subscribe if you're new, and let me know in the comments what you think Elias should do next. Let's light the fire and get started. Elias returned to his workshop with a renewed spark, his satchel bulging with Mara's herbs, mandrake roots twisted like gnarled hands, belladonna berries dark as night, and a vial of distilled rosewater. Tobin greeted him with a mix of relief and skepticism, his straw palate still smelling of last week's failed potion. The village outside was quieter than usual. the air thick with the threat of rain and the lingering tension from the mob's last visit. Elias knew time was short. The church's inquisitor was rumored to be closing in, and that cloaked figure from the market might already be plotting. The experiment was his boldest yet. Using Mara's herbs, he planned to refine his philosopher's stone recipe, adding a pinch of powdered antimony and a drop of mercury to the mix. His grimoire lay open, its pages yellowed and stained, revealing a diagram of a transmutation circle drawn in faded ink. He set up his brass scales, the creak of the metal echoing in the cramped space, and lit the oil lamp to cast a dramatic glow over his tools. Tobin was tasked with grinding the mandrake, his hands trembling as the root's bitter scent filled the room. The process was delicate. Elias heated the iron cauldron, its surface scarred from past explosions, and poured in the rose water. He added the belladonna, watching as the liquid turned a deep purple, then sprinkled the antimony. The mixture hissed, sending up a plume of smoke that stung their eyes. Tobin coughed, waving his hand, but Elias pressed on, chanting an incantation from the grimoire. The words felt alive, vibrating in the air as the potion began to shimmer, a sign it might work. Then came the mercury. Elias hesitated, knowing its volatility, but poured it in with a steady hand. The cauldron erupted in a flash of silver light, the liquid swirling like a living thing. For a moment, a lump of lead on the table glowed, its edges softening as if melting into gold. Elias's heart pounded. Had he done it? But the glow faded, and the lead remained stubbornly unchanged. The cauldron cracked, spilling the smoking mess onto the floor. Tobin yelped, jumping back as the room filled with acrid fumes. The failure was a blow, but the near success fueled Elias's determination. He cleaned up with Tobin's help, salvaging what he could, when a knock rattled the door. It was Mara, her face pale under her wimple. "They're coming," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "The Inquisitor's men. Someone tipped them off." Elias's stomach dropped. He grabbed his grimoire and the iron chest, shoving them into a hidden compartment behind a loose stone wall. Tobin doused the lamp, plunging the workshop into darkness. The door burst open, revealing 3 armored guards, their metal breastplates glinting in the torchlight they carried. Their leader, a stern man with a scarred face, demanded to see Elias's work. "We've heard of your devilry," he growled, his voice echoing off the worn wood. Elias played dumb, claiming he was just a healer. But the guard spotted a spilled vial of mercury. "Contraband!" he shouted, signaling his men to search. They tore through the shelves, smashing pots and scattering herbs. Mara stepped forward, her voice firm. "He's no threat, just a man trying to feed his family." The guard hesitated, but his eyes narrowed. "We'll take him for questioning," he said, grabbing Elias's arm. As they dragged him out, Tobin slipped the grimoire from its hiding spot, tucking it under his tunic. The workshop was left in ruins, the cauldron a twisted wreck. But the fight wasn't over. The next story will follow Tobin as he takes up Elias's mantle, determined to finish what his master started. Stick around, give this a thumbs up, and let's keep the adventure going. Story 5, Chapter 1, The Healing Hut. Hey, everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're starting a fresh story tonight, one that dives into the world of medieval herbalists and a curse that's got everyone on edge. Meet Aveline, a healer with a knack for plants and a secret that could doom her village. So, grab a cup of tea, hit that like button if you're ready, and subscribe if you're new. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And let's step into Aveline's healing hut. Aveline's home was a small, thatched hut on the edge of a muddy village, its walls patched with woven reeds and tattered cloth. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of chamomile, zaga, and the sharp bite of crushed garlic. Her workbench was a chaos of clay jars filled with dried herbs, a wooden mortar stained with green paste, and a rusted iron kettle simmering over a low fire. This was her sanctuary, where she brewed remedies for the sick and weary, a niche that kept her busy from dawn to dusk. Healing in the Middle Ages was a blend of skill and superstition. Aveline learned her craft from her grandmother, who'd taught her to identify plants like yarrow for wounds and fever, few for headaches. Her tools were simple but vital: a bone-handled knife for cutting roots, a linen pouch for storing petals, and a brass sieve to strain her brews. She'd spend hours foraging in the wild, dodging brambles and the occasional wolf, returning with baskets of nettles and elderberries. The villagers relied on her, bringing coins or eggs in exchange for salves that eased their aches. But privacy was a luxury Aveline couldn't afford. Her hut doubled as a clinic, with patients crowding in, coughing children, limping farmers, and once a knight with a gash from a duel. The single room had a straw pallet where she slept, separated from her work by a worn curtain. Neighbors peeked through the window, curious about her methods, while the local priest watched from afar, wary of anything that smelled too much like magic. The church tolerated healers, but drew a hard line at anything resembling witchcraft. Aveline's life changed when old Marta, the village elder, stumbled in one evening, her face gaunt and her hands trembling. "It's the curse," she rasped, collapsing onto a wooden stool. Marta claimed a traveler had hexed the village, leaving a trail of sickness and bad luck. Aveline examined her, noting the fever and blackened veins, symptoms she'd never seen. She brewed a tea of willow bark and mint, but Marta's condition worsened. Whispers spread that Aveline's remedies were failing, fueling suspicions of a darker power. The pressure mounted. Villagers demanded answers, their voices rising outside her hut. Aveline worked late into the night, mixing honey with crushed thyme and a drop of elderberry juice, hoping to break the curse. Her hands shook as she stirred the kettle, the iron handle burning her fingers. She muttered a prayer, not to the church's god, but to the old spirits her grandmother revered, knowing it could get her in trouble. The brew glowed faintly, a sign of hope, but Marta's breathing grew shallow. Then came the breakthrough. Aveline remembered a rare herb, wolfsbane, said to purge curses. She'd seen it growing near a ruined chapel, its purple flowers a stark contrast to the gray stone. Risking the night, she grabbed her bone knife and a tattered cloak, slipping out as the village slept. The chapel was a desolate place, its walls cracked from war, illuminated by a sliver of moon. She found the wolfsbane, its roots tangled in the earth, and cut it with care. Back at the hut, she added the wolfsbane to her brew, the room filling with a bitter scent. Marta stirred, her eyes fluttering open as the potion took hold. But the relief was short-lived. A shadow moved outside. Someone had seen her. The next chapter will follow Aveline as she faces the consequences of her forbidden cure. Keep watching. Give this a thumbs up. And let's see what's next. Story 5. Chapter 2. The Witch Hunt begins. Hey, folks, we're back with Aveline's story, and things are heating up. Last time, we saw her brewing a risky cure with wolfsbane to save old Marta from a mysterious curse. Tonight, we're diving into the fallout as a witch hunt brews in the village. So, hit that like button if you're on the edge of your seat. Subscribe if you're new. And let me know in the comments what you think Aveline should do. Let's get into it. Aveline barely slept after saving Marta. The old woman's fever broke, her blackened veins fading. But the hut was a mess. Spilled herbs, a cracked clay jar, and the lingering stench of wolfsbane. She cleaned with trembling hands, her bone knife still stained with purple juice, when a sharp knock jolted her. It was the village priest, Father Aldrich, his robes dusty, and his face set in a scowl. "I saw you at the chapel," he said, his voice cold. "Wolfsbane is the devil's work. Explain yourself." Aveline tried to deflect, claiming it was just a strong herb for healing. But Aldrich wasn't buying it. He'd heard the whispers, villagers muttering about the curse lifting after her late-night trip. "You've meddled with forces beyond your station," he warned, promising to report her to the bishop. The church's stance on herbalism was clear, useful, but any hint of magic was heresy. Aveline's heart sank as he left, his torch casting long shadows across her tattered curtain. Word spread fast. By midday, a crowd gathered outside, their voices a mix of fear and anger. A farmer named Rolf, his son still sick from the curse, shouted, "She's a witch." Others joined in, waving pitchforks and rusted sickles. Aveline barricaded the door with a wooden bench, her linen pouch of herbs clutched tight. She knew the stakes. Accusations of witchcraft could mean trial by ordeal, a dunk in the river, or the pyre. Her only ally, Marta, was too weak to help, resting on the straw pallet. Aveline decided to fight back. She grabbed her brass sieve and a jar of honeyed salve, stepping outside to face the mob. "I saved Marta," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear. "Check her yourselves." The crowd hesitated, but Rolf's glare didn't waver. "Magic or not, you're trouble," he spat. A stone flew, grazing her shoulder, and she retreated inside, the door shuddering under their fists. That night, she planned her defense. She mixed a calming tea, chamomile and lavender, hoping to soothe the village's panic. But a new threat emerged. A cloaked figure slipped a note under her door, its parchment brittle. "Meet me at the old mill, or they'll burn you tomorrow." The handwriting was unfamiliar, the ink smudged with haste. Aveline's mind raced. Was it a trap, or a chance to clear her name? She armed herself with her bone knife and a tattered cloak. Venturing into the dark, the mill was a ruin, its wooden beams sagging from years of neglect. Illuminated by a single torch, inside, she found Mara, the herbalist from Elias's story, her face half hidden by a wimple. I heard about your trouble. Mara said, I can help. But you must trust me. She offered a rare root, said to prove innocence in church trials, but warned it came with a price. Loyalty to her network of outcast healers. Aveline agreed, taking the root as the mill creaked around them. But as they parted, a guard's shout echoed outside. The Inquisitor had arrived, his metal armor clanking in the night. Aveline fled, the root hidden in her pouch, knowing the hunt was far from over. The next chapter will follow her as she faces the trial and a shocking revelation. Stick around, give this a thumbs up, and let's keep the story rolling. Story 5, Chapter 3, The Trial of Truth. Hey, Gong, we're wrapping up Aveline's tale tonight, and it's about to get intense. Last time, we saw her dodge a mob and team up with Mara, only to face the Inquisitor's pursuit. Now, she's headed for a trial that could save or doom her. So, hit that like button if you're gripped. Subscribe if you're new, and let me know in the comments what you think of Aveline's courage. Let's dive into the drama. Aveline woke to the sound of clanging metal. Guards at her door, their torches casting jagged shadows through the cracks. The Inquisitor, a gaunt man named Brother Cyril, stood at the forefront, his black robes fluttering in the dawn wind. You're charged with witchcraft, he intoned, his voice like gravel. Come with us. Aveline clutched her bone knife and the root from Mara, her heart pounding as they escorted her to the village square, a muddy patch flanked by crumbling stone walls. The trial was a grim affair. Villagers gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread, while Father Aldrich presided with a rusted iron cross in hand. Cyril laid out the evidence: her late-night trip to the chapel, the wolf's bane, and Marta's recovery, which he called unnatural. Aveline stood on a wooden platform, her tattered cloak flapping. As Rolf and others testified against her, she cursed us first. Rolf shouted, his sickle gleaming. Aveline's defense was weak. She claimed healing, not magic. But Cyril demanded a trial by ordeal. The ordeal was the dunking stool, a crude device of worn wood and rusted chains. If she floated, she was a witch. If she sank, innocent, but dead. Aveline's hands shook as they bound her, the cold water of the village pond looming below. She slipped the root into her mouth, its bitter taste spreading as Mara had instructed. It'll prove your truth, Mara had said, but Aveline wasn't sure. The guards lowered her, the water closing over her head, her lungs burning. Miraculously, she sank, the root's weight pulling her down. They hauled her up, gasping and soaked, and Cyril frowned. Innocent by God's judgment, he muttered, though his eyes lingered with doubt. The crowd murmured, some relieved, others suspicious. But the trial wasn't over. Cyril demanded she reveal her source. Aveline hesitated, protecting Mara, and was sentenced to house arrest. Her hut guarded by 2 men with rusted spears. That night, a visitor slipped past the guards. Mara, her wimple hiding a sly smile. You survived, she whispered, handing Aveline a new herb, said to ward off future curses. But she revealed a twist. The traveler who'd cursed the village was Cyril's spy, testing Aveline's skills to recruit her for the church's secret alchemical order. The curse was a setup. Aveline's anger flared. Her life had been a pawn in their game. She refused, vowing to heal independently. Mara nodded, leaving her with the herb and a warning. "They'll watch you." Aveline rebuilt her hut, her brass sieve gleaming with new purpose, determined to master her craft free of manipulation. The curse was lifted, but her fight for trust had just begun. That wraps up Aveline's story. But we've got more tales to tell. Stick around, give this a thumbs up, and let's keep the journey alive. Story 6, Chapter 1, The Scriptorium's Silence. Hey, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're starting a new story that takes us into the quiet world of medieval scribes, where ink and parchment hold more power than swords. Meet Cedric, a scribe with a vow that could rewrite his fate. So, grab a cozy blanket, hit that like button if you're excited, and subscribe if you're new. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And let's step into the scriptorium. Cedric's life was one of stillness, spent in the dim light of a monastery scriptorium. The room was a long, stone-walled chamber, its air heavy with the scent of parchment and the faint mustiness of aged vellum. Rows of wooden desks stretched out, each topped with quills, ink pots, and stacks of manuscripts waiting to be copied. His tools were his pride: a goose-feather quill worn to a perfect point, a bone-handled knife for trimming parchment, and a brass ink pot that gleamed despite its dents. This was his niche, a sacred duty to preserve knowledge in a world teetering on chaos. Scribing was a meticulous craft. Cedric spent hours bent over his desk, his fingers stained black from ink, copying Latin texts by candlelight. The monastery followed a strict schedule: prayers at dawn, work until noon, then more prayers, leaving little room for error. His latest task was a copy of the Book of Hours, its pages filled with intricate initials he illuminated with gold leaf and crimson dye. The work demanded focus, but it also offered escape from the monastery's rigid rules and the whispers of war beyond its walls. Privacy was non-existent. Cedric shared the scriptorium with a dozen monks, their robes rustling as they worked in silence, broken only by the scratch of quills and an occasional cough. His sleeping cell was a narrow alcove with a straw mattress, separated by a tattered cloth curtain from his neighbor's snores. The abbot, a stern figure named Brother Thomas, patrolled the room, his rusted metal cross clinking with each step, ensuring no one strayed from their vows. Cedric's vow was different. Years ago, he'd promised to record a hidden history, a chronicle of a peasant uprising crushed by the local lord. The story had been passed to him by a dying villager, its details etched into his memory: burned homes, stolen grain, and a leader hanged without trial. He kept it secret, scribbling notes on scraps of parchment hidden under his mattress. The church would call it treason, but Cedric saw it as truth. Trouble brewed when a new monk, Brother Hugh, arrived. Hugh was young, eager, and too curious. He noticed Cedric's extra parchment, his quill moving late into the night. "What are you writing?" Hugh asked one evening, his voice low. Cedric brushed it off, but Hugh's eyes lingered. The next day, a page of Cedric's chronicle went missing, replaced by a blank sheet. Panic set in. Someone knew. The monastery's silence turned oppressive. Cedric worked faster, illuminating a page with trembling hands, the gold leaf catching the candlelight. He needed to finish before Hugh reported him. Outside, the sound of hooves signaled a lord's visit, adding pressure. Cedric's vow was a burden, but also his purpose. The next chapter will follow him as he uncovers Hugh's intent and faces a dangerous choice. Keep watching. Give this a thumbs up. And let's see what unfolds. Story 6. Chapter 2. The Stolen Secret. Hey, friends. We're back with Cedric's story, and the stakes are rising. Last time, we met him in the quiet scriptorium, hiding a secret chronicle under the weight of his vows. Tonight, we're diving into the theft of his work and the tension it brings. So, hit that like button if you're hooked. Subscribe if you're new, and let me know in the comments what you think Cedric should do. Let's get into the scriptorium's shadows. Cedric couldn't shake the unease after discovering his missing page. The scriptorium's silence felt heavier. The scratch of quills, a constant reminder of eyes on him. He scanned the room. Brother Hugh was at his desk, his quill moving with unnatural speed, a smirk tugging at his lips. Cedric's heart sank. That page held the uprising's bloodiest detail. The Lord's men torching a village chapel. If Hugh turned it over, Cedric's vow would be his undoing. He decided to investigate. Late that night, after prayers, Cedric slipped from his cell, his bare feet silent on the stone floor. The monastery was asleep, save for the occasional creak of timber. He crept to Hugh's desk, its surface cluttered with parchment scraps and a rusted ink pot. Under a pile of vellum, he found his page, its ink smudged but legible. Relief washed over him until he heard a rustle. Hugh stood in the doorway, his candle casting a flickering shadow. "What are you doing?" Hugh demanded, his voice sharp. Cedric stammered, clutching the page. "This is mine," he said, but Hugh's smirk widened. "Not anymore. I've copied it for the abbot." Cedric's stomach dropped. Hugh revealed he'd been tasked by Brother Thomas to root out dissent, a role that turned the scriptorium into a trap. The stolen secret was leverage, and Hugh wasn't above using it. The next day, the abbot called a meeting. Thomas, his metal cross glinting, addressed the monks with a stern gaze. "We've uncovered a threat," he said, holding up Hugh's copy. Cedric's hands trembled as the room turned to him. He denied it, claiming it was a draft for a historical text. But Thomas wasn't convinced. "You'll prove your loyalty," he ordered, assigning Cedric to copy a church decree condemning rebels. Ironic. Given his vow, Cedric worked under scrutiny, his quill scratching out words he despised. The gold leaf for illumination feeling like a chain. Hugh watched, his presence a constant threat. Outside, the Lord's visit loomed, his armored retinue clanking through the monastery gates. Cedric overheard a guard mention a reward for information on the uprising. Proof the Lord knew more than he let on. Desperation drove him to act. He slipped a coded note into his latest manuscript, a plea for help to a sympathetic monk in a neighboring abbey. The risk was huge. If caught, he'd face the lash or exile, but his vow demanded it. That night, He hid the manuscript in a hollowed-out prayer book, praying it reached its destination. The next chapter will follow Cedric as he faces the Lord's interrogation and a surprising ally. Stick around, give this a thumbs up, and let's keep the story alive. Story 6. Chapter 3. The Lord's Judgment. Hey, Gong, we're wrapping up Cedric's tale tonight, and it's about to hit a climax. Last time, we saw him reclaim his stolen page, only to face Hugh's betrayal and the abbot's suspicion. Now, he's up against the Lord's judgment, with his vow on the line. So, hit that like button if you're on the edge. Subscribe if you're new, and let me know in the comments what you think of Cedric's fight. Let's dive in. The monastery buzzed with tension as the Lord, Sir Baldwin, arrived. His armor clanked with every step, his fur-lined cloak sweeping the stone floor. The scriptorium fell silent as he entered, his eyes scanning the monks like a hawk. Brother Thomas bowed, presenting Hugh's copy of Cedric's Chronicle. "We've found a rebel scribe," Thomas said, his voice oily. Baldwin's gaze locked on Cedric, who stood frozen, his quill slipping from his hand. The interrogation began in the chapter house, a cold room with cracked walls and a single torch. Baldwin sat on a wooden throne, his rusted sword resting beside him. "You've written lies," she growled, slamming the parchment down. Cedric's mind raced. He admitted to the Chronicle but framed it as a historical record, not rebellion. Baldwin wasn't impressed. "The uprising cost me men," he snarled. "You'll name your source or face the lash." Cedric held firm, his vow a shield. He'd promised to protect the villagers' memory, and no amount of pain would break that. Baldwin ordered 2 guards to bind him, their metal cuffs biting into his wrists. The lash came down, its leather strip tearing his robe. But Cedric bit back a cry, his fingers curling around a hidden scrap of parchment, a coded message he'd kept. The guards tired after 10 strikes, leaving him bruised but unbroken. A surprise shifted the tide. The sympathetic monk, Brother Paul, arrived from the neighboring abbey, his robes dusty from a hurried ride. He carried Cedric's manuscript, its coded note decoded. "This man seeks truth, not treason," Paul declared, presenting evidence of the Lord's own brutality. Grain seizures that sparked the uprising. Baldwin's face darkened, but the abbot intervened, fearing scandal. "Release him," Thomas muttered, his authority wavering. Cedric was freed, his wounds bandaged with tattered cloth by Paul. Hugh slunk away, his leverage gone. Baldwin left with a warning. "Keep your pen quiet." Cedric returned to the scriptorium, his quill trembling as he resumed his work. But his vow was intact. He began a new chronicle, hidden in plain sight within church texts, a silent rebellion against tyranny. His fight was won, but the war for truth lingered. That wraps up Cedric's story, but more adventures await. Give this a thumbs up, subscribe, and let's keep exploring